Do you want to go today?
No, he wants to go today.
Lindsay.
Okay. Okay. Going today. All right, let's pray.
Let's go.
No, I'll tell her she doesn't have class until 3:30.
Oh boy, I'm starting to yawn.
Oh, hey, we gotta sacrifice that cup of coffee.
All right,
Have a rest day.
Evan.
let's pray. We're gonna be fighting. We're gonna fight fairly today, so we gotta keep jacked up.
Fight fairly.
We're still on fighting fairly. The concept.
Right. It's overrated.
It's overrated. Just have a rest day. All right. Dearest Heavenly Father, we pray that you'd help us today, that you'd be with everybody in all that they do. Help them with the things that they're struggling with and give them everything that they need to do what they need to do correctly. And bless them in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
All right. We're got a different list of do's and don'ts for fighting fairly.
Is this still chapter 12?
Still chapter 12.
Yes, still 12. 12, then we do 13,
And 14.
divorce remarriage, and then 14 is, I don't know, it's like stuff. Whatever stuff.
A
You
recap.
kind of like pull it all together. All right, do's and don'ts of fighting fair. So some of these are ones that we went over, but there's some things that are not that I thought were interesting. All right, first thing, deal with the here and now. So it's about identifying the specific problem and really identifying what it is. What's good about, I think, about doing this fair fighting rules thing is if you have a serious relationship or engaged, married, I think that as you get to the stage where you start having arguments, if you could create a list like this, like through maybe the things that are maybe the areas where you guys are weak in, it could be helpful to, instead of fighting against the other person and seeing it as a battle between two people, you can together fight the problem instead of fighting each other. So it changes your focus a bit. All right, so you're narrowing down what the problem is here and now. Take responsibility. Use I statements when you're talking about feelings and actions. Be direct and honest. So don't beat around the bush. Don't be fearful about what you want to say. Listen and hear. So this would include active listening, right? You're not looking at the phone. You're not one earbud in the ear sort of thing. You're giving eye contact. What else would active listening do? Eye contact. What else? Nodding head. Body posturing. So legs are generally towards the person. So you're trying to show that you're engaged with them. All right? That can make people really mad if you're not looking at them at all. All right. Give the other person equal time. So giving, like, if you're talking a lot, pause and give the other person the time to talk to. Attack the issue. All right, so it's the issue. No name calling. It's not a fight against a person. It's against a problem. Take a breather by paraphrasing what you think you heard them saying. So that would be that mirroring concept. I hear you saying you feel such and such. Focus on solving the problem. So just not saying, how you feel, but thinking about a solution where both people can win. Deal with one issue at a time, so that's narrowing it to one problem. Limit your discussion, fight to no more than 30 minutes. That could be negotiable, depends on how much energy you have to put into it. Brainstorming solutions, think about compromises. Go forth as equals, all right? So when you're in an argument in the first place, you're having a mindset of, we are on the same team, this isn't a power struggle, we're trying to do this together to solve the problem, to beat it and move ahead. When necessary, taking time out. So we talked about how emotions can be too high. Give each other the ability to withdraw or change your mind. Right? You might have thought that have you ever done this when you've gotten into an argument and then all of a sudden you become convinced of the other person's view? And then you're like, okay, never mind. Start over. Speak softly. All right? You don't need to, you can raise your voice, try whispering. Identify and define your issue or topic, stick to it. Hold hands. Hard to fight if you're holding hands with somebody. Looking into one another's eyes, holding hands. Like, seriously, that would really, that deflates things. All right? Then hold hands, we're on the same team.
I've actually never thought about that.
Yeah, let's get through it. Ask questions that will clarify and not judge. So not using those why statements, but you're just asking for a clarification. You're not trying to accuse. All right, don't bring up the past problems, mistakes. Don't blame. Use I statements rather than you. So you're focusing on thoughts about yourself and not the problem with the other person. Don't make comparisons to other people, stereotypes, or situations. Don't play games. All right, you're not out to manipulate. Using games such as poor me, so you're trying to make yourself into a victim. Silent treatment, martyr. Don't touch me, uproar, kick me. If it weren't for you, yes, but see what you made me do.
Ooh, gaslight.
And if you loved me, you would do such and such.
So for the first one, do you feel like what do you do if you feel like it hasn't been resolved? Or like
If it hasn't been resolved, then you have to keep working at it. But it would be a separate, potentially a separate issue. Right, if you're focusing on another problem. But yeah, I would say there's definitely things that do keep coming back, but you probably put that aside and say, this is a separate issue. I think we need to go into this too. Maybe not that moment, but another time. But yeah, things do come back. But maybe if something is resolved, but a lot of times it's character assassination, really, where you're trying to like push down the other person.
Yeah.
All right, more thoughts there? No. All right. Don't involve other people's opinions of the situation. So it's just between you two. Don't make threats. Do this or else.
Toxic.
Don't demand to win. Don't say always and never. We already talked about that. Don't interrupt. Talk over or make comments while the other person is speaking. Watch your non-verbal expressions too. Rolling eyes, smirking, yawning, all work against fair fighting. I do find that I have to concentrate sometimes not looking at a person in order to verbally think.
Yeah.
I don't know, some of you guys like that?
Yeah.
All right, so maybe you could say, I'm not trying to not pay attention to you, but I literally like have to stare off. Like as I'm teaching you guys half the time, I'm like this. In order to concentrate on not like the feedback of what everybody's doing, I have to focus on something else.
Right.
So I don't know, maybe if you can verbalize that, I can't stare into your eyes because it melts me into a pool of I don't know what.
Oh, come on now.
Temptation.
Don't walk away or leave the house without saying to your partner, "I'll be back."
Really?
No,
Terminator moments. I'll be
I'll be back. No finger pointing. Don't save up feelings and dump them all at once. Try to air feelings often. All right, so don't save up all of the issues. Try not to yell. No talk of divorce.
Ooh.
All right, it's never something that you don't ever pull that card. It's not on the table. So you don't ever threaten to leave the relationship, because that just creates a level of anxiety to it and insecurity. Don't read your partner's mind. All right, so don't think that you understand them. Try to clarify it. Don't expect your partner to read your mind. If you're not saying it, they might not know.
I can't even read my mind.
Don't use the following: swearing, denunciation, obscenities, character assassination, contempt, sarcasm, or taunting. Don't assume, guess, imagine, take for granted, theorize, surmise, make gestures, judgments, funny glances, or faces about what your partner means. Find out. No belittling each other's accomplishments, no matter how odd or small they may be. Don't be afraid to apologize when you're wrong.
Amen.
Shows you're trying. Don't argue about the details. So getting caught up, instead of the argument, you get caught up into a detail that might not be accurate, such as saying you're 20 minutes late and then no, it's actually 13 minutes. So you're kind of falling into, like, that's not the problem. But we do this all the time. All right, that's all of those. All right, who wants to go first for presentation?
I can do it first.
You want to go first? All right, you go first.
Yes, I want to see. Yes. Yes, you want to see the full meaning of this piece.
You're our dating expert?
Oh.
I've done a lot of research, but anyways, this is just, I did a chapter 4 question reflection. So just kind of looking over the questions, and we kind of did it in class already, but this is just kind of more of my opinions and such, because this is my few minutes. But anyways, I'll go over the introduction and kind of go over the questions. So, dating in society has taken many different forms over the years, especially in America. From couples being arranged to courting and free love to hookup culture, it seems that the ideal standard for what dating should be changes heavily over time. In Chapter 4 of Marriage and Family, a Christian Perspective, the general ideas and practices of dating are made clear and provide a lot of food for thought on how dating in the modern era has significantly changed from even 10 to 20 years ago. So, question 1, dating can mean different things to different people. Discuss some of the different dilemmas this presents for couples and relationships. So, put simply, everybody is different. Like, no matter where you're from, or where your background is, like, you're going to be a bit similar to people, but in general, everybody got different ideas and different lifestyles. And that didn't necessarily mean much back in the day when people had arranged marriages, because they just kind of were put with somebody and they just kind of had to deal with it, and that's it. But nowadays, you're really getting with people based on your preferences, or what you like and they like, and their lifestyle matches up with yours, and there's a lot of stuff that has to line up for things to work. And so, generally, nowadays, it's a lot harder for people to find somebody that, they actually want to be with, because they have to be really close to them. And people use terms like green flags and red flags, and that's a whole different story. But essentially, people, if you're looking at the secular world, it's more of like a follow your dreams type of lifestyle, where you kind of do what you want to do, and it's really like if you're going to be with somebody, they're just going to be along for the ride. And that can be seen as a little bit selfish, but from Christian dating and what I've talked with a lot of people, it's more of you're going to follow the will of God, and you're going to have somebody help you with that, and you're going to help them with that. So it's more of working together like that in the Christian sense. And for question 2, is dating good preparation for marriage? Why or why not? And generally, you're going to hear yes from a lot of people, because it's not really understanding the question. Like, I used to be like, yeah, of course it's good preparation for marriage, because you're going to know the person more. But when you get to really thinking about it, dating somebody is really not the same at all to marriage. Like, yeah, you're gonna be talking with that person a lot, and you're gonna learn a lot about them. But marriage is a lot more serious, and there's a lot more important things that you have to take care of together. And when you're dating, it's more like, yeah, you're just gonna go on dates and have fun and just spend time together. But it's not really like, you're not gonna worry about finances, or, you know, at the time, like if you're a Christian, you're really not gonna have kids. So you're not worrying about kids, and you're not living together and worrying about a house, and like that's all the crazy stuff that you gotta deal with when you're married. But when you're dating, you're just like, hey, you know, I wanna see you like twice, 3 times a week, and we can go out and do something or watch a movie, and then that's like really fun, and you go back to, you know, doing stuff on your own. So it's a lot different, and so I kind of used to bounce back and forth on that, but nowadays it's like, yeah, like, you know, it's probably not good preparation for marriage. It's really good preparation for knowing that person. You just spend a lot of time with that person, but it's not really good preparation for marriage. And question 3 is, what does authentic sexuality mean for you personally? Are there ways you should be changing your behavior to be more consistent with biblical norms? So they didn't really say what it was in the textbook, but authentic sexuality to me, just from hearing stories about it and just reading a little bit in the textbook, it's just keeping true to being safe and healthy with your sexual desires. And, you know, whether that means not doing it at all, or, you know, you're waiting until marriage, or things like that. So it looks a little bit different for everybody, but a lot of people nowadays in the secular world are giving into the hookup culture, and that's not being authentic at all with somebody, especially since a lot of the times people will engage in that, and then they won't really talk to that person unless that's what they want from that person. You're not really being a good friend or having a nice relationship with that person. You're really just using them like it's like a good and a service, instead of actually having a relationship with that person. So that's not authentic at all. But the Christian model for that instead is just to be with somebody, and then you're only going to do that after you get married. And at that point, you're going to develop a much greater relationship with that person, because you're saving that special part of yourself for that person only. And that's unfortunately what people in the secular world today don't really see. And I definitely was a part of that when I wasn't a Christian. And it's really like one of the loneliest things you can really do to yourself, because you're not really making any good relationships with anybody. And then question 4, how can remaining single enhance or hinder someone's Christian walk? So personally, I've been single for almost 3 years now. And I used to date in the secular world, but I haven't dated in the Christian world yet. And I think that's a good thing for me personally right now. That's just based on, you know, trying to get closer to God and just spend more time just reading more of the Bible, and just having more time for myself to research more, and really just get to know a lot of people and just be friends with a lot of people, which is like a lot different than what it used to be. But I feel like you can also develop a lot of growth when being with somebody that's, you know, either equal to you or greater in the walk with God, because you can be greatly inspired by being with that person. And it could change your whole life, being with the right person. And it could just literally enhance your walk, and you can even enhance theirs as well. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you.
All right.
Fire.
Am I on the right thing? Yes. All right, so here's a summary. A summary of ways to resolve conflict in just 5 points. Identifying the issue, I think we got that that's a really important thing. The right time and place. Begin with a positive stroke, so remembering that you have to soften the blow of criticism. So when you say something nice, it automatically changes the tone to something that's constructive instead of destructive. All right, express anger without abusing one another. So it's not wrong, but must be controlled using the I statements, taking responsibility for how you feel. Verbal and physical abuse, wrong, sinful. Avoid triangles, so it's about you two and not pulling in other friends, family, kids. All right, focus on the positive. So the first few minutes of an interaction can be crucial in setting the tone for its outcome. So if you realize that disagreements come up, go at it positively, Look for something encouraging to say. Say, let's bring up, see how we can figure out what this issue is. Let's do it calmly. Practice the active listening. Don't always say every single thing that you're thinking and feeling. Right? It's not that important to bring up just get the whole gist of the major things. Couples who begin to tolerate hurtful statements and bad behavior from one another begin to destroy their relationship. So when you allow it to become a habit of somebody saying something that's sinful, damaging towards you, and you just keep accepting it as something, it can become a habit and then the relationship deteriorates. All right, so you're focusing on it in a positive way. All right, marriage tips. All right, we are going to look at this now. All right, marriage 101 tips. So, when you have a problem, first thing, seek help early. All right, so the average couple waits 6 years for seeking help for marital problems. I think that might be becoming a little less common as counseling is becoming something that's more available, but it's not always, like here on campus you guys have a counselor, but everywhere else you gotta pay for it, it costs a lot of money. So that's really a huge deterrent is cost. And also just the embarrassment or shame of feeling that you need help. So the average couple waits 6 years. Keep in mind that half of all marriages that end do so in the first 7 years. So if help is sought sooner, that's going to be more likely for the marriage to last longer. All right, so this means the average couple lives with unhappiness for far too long. Second thing, edit yourself. Couples who avoid saying every critical thought when discussing touchy topics are consistently the happiest. All right, so you just skip a whole lot. Not the important things. Soften your startup. So that would be saying something that is gentle. What's the proverb? A gentle answer turns away wrath.
Yep, and a harsh word stirs up anger.
Or a harsh word stirs up anger.
Yes.
Okay, so if you come across harshly, it gets the other person going. If you come across gently, it brings a gentle response. Accept influence. A marriage succeeds to the extent that the husband can accept influence from his wife, so he's open to being taught. All right, for example, a woman says, "Do you have to work Thursday night? My mother is coming that weekend and I need your help getting ready." The husband says, "My plans are set and I'm not changing them." This guy's in a shaky marriage. A husband's ability to be influenced by his wife rather than vice versa is crucial. Research demonstrates that women are already well practiced in accepting influence from men, and a true partnership only occurs when a husband can do it as well. So this would be, men be open to the influence of the woman. Women generally are open to the influence, but if you're not, you need to do it. Have high standards. Happy couples have high standards for each other. The most successful couples are those who, even as newlyweds, refuse to accept hurtful behavior from one another. All right, you kind of call it for what it is. Sinful behavior. Okay, that's what you do. You literally said this, it's sinful to act this way, and it's something that you can't do. You try to bring them towards behaving right. The lower the level of tolerance for bad behavior in the beginning of a relationship, the happier the couple will be down the road. Learn to repair and exit the argument. So successful couples know how to exit an argument. Happy couples know how to repair the situation before an argument gets completely out of control. So successful repair attempts include changing the topic to something completely unrelated, using humor, stroking your partner with a caring remark. I understand that this is hard for you, making it clear that you're on common ground. This is our problem, backing down in marriage as in the martial art. What is this? How do you say that?
Aikido.
Aikido. You have to yield to win.
Aikido.
Interesting. And in general, offering signs of appreciation for your partner and his or her feelings, along with the way I really appreciate and thank you for. If the argument gets too heated, take time to calm it down. Or just think that if you can fight well, you pretty much can get through anything, guys.
There you go.
Like, this is like huge, being able to handle conflict and having a lasting marriage is really, really important. Focus on the bright side. When discussing problems, happily married couples make at least 5 times as many positive statements to and about each other and their relationship than negative ones. For example, we may laugh a lot instead of we never have any fun. A good marriage must have a rich climate for positivism. Make deposits in your emotional bank account. So some good thoughts. All right. Okay, destructive conflict now. So when things go bad. All right, family violence. So conflict that's avoided, the ones that you put off and you have poor skills in relationships, poor relational skills with one another, it can erupt into a bad situation. All right, so we're going to look at myths. First one, family violence is rare. It's not rare. All right, so it can come from the man, from the woman, even children towards parents, anyway. All right, when I moved to Ellendale, when we bought our house, they're like, oh, this is such a quiet, safe neighborhood. And I'm always like, the dogs are always barking around here, it's loud. And within a year of living in our house, behind our house, the neighbor shot his wife. Right behind in their house. Yeah, I'm like, this is a real great safe place.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, and he was
Oh, wow.
paralyzed, took a .22 out and shot her in the house. And then within that same year, there was another domestic violence that was a shooting, on a farm just outside of town, not shortly thereafter, but I was like, oh, this is a great place.
Oh.
But it's not rare, and it's not even rare, here. There's a lot of rough locals in Ellendale and in any place that you go to.
That is true.
And even in Christian homes. Family violence is not, it's confined to the lower class. Myth, obviously, it's in anybody. Alcohol and drugs are the real cause of abuse in the home. All right, it definitely can be a factor, but not the factor for all. 4, battered spouses like being hit. Who believes this?
Huh?
This is like some rough person that came up with this myth. And are responsible for family violence, otherwise they would leave. Okay, obviously this isn't someone that thinks great, that would think this. 5, children who are abused will grow up to be abusers. Okay, this is a myth in that generally they go either the same path or the opposite path. Right? I grew up in a home where my parents were alcoholics, and into drugs. My dad was physically abusive towards me. But a lot of times that you see kids that grow up in those other homes, they either become that parent or they try to become the opposite. And both my brother and I chose to become the complete opposite. So we tried to be as successful as we possibly can. And literally a lot of my motivational thinking in life is don't act like your mother. It's like, I can't tell you how many times I've said that, where I felt like I could feel like a response where I'm responding the way she would, where I'd be mirroring a type of behavior, how she would respond to things, and then I'd say, I do not want to be her. And my brother said the same thing. So a lot of people do that. They either try to overcompensate. You don't want to overcompensate too and be perfectionist on the wrong side. Or they follow the same path, so not always the same way. All right, myth 6, domestic violence is a loss of control. Not necessarily it's a choice. All right, it's not just an automatic reaction that the person doesn't have control over, but a choice. All right, violence in family, spouse abuse. So abuse can consist of criminal, so physical or sexual abuse, or non-criminal behaviors, such as emotional type abuse, psychological, finances. So it can occur, through a lot of different means. Often it begins even before the marriage even starts. All right, and frequently in these sort of relationships, they start out where people already see the red flags, but the person might not see it, but friends might, or family members might see it before the relationship is even established. And then it tends to escalate. All right, so the person might deny that it's a problem and it gets bigger over time. Victims often feel that they deserve the abuse and have no other options. So they might feel responsible for some behaviors, and maybe they do have some behaviors, but those behaviors would never warrant being treated abusively. They're often isolated from others and choose to stay in the relationship. I recently heard of a story around Ellendale about a person that was in a sort of abusive relationship where the man took away all the vehicles from the woman. So basically when you're out on a farm out in North Dakota and you have no vehicles and you have no way to leave, it's a strong sense of trying to control somebody. Right? So sometimes they do things like that, and in rural communities, people really, really can't reach out. Imagine that, if you gotta walk 15 miles and they controlled her ability to talk to people and everything, and the children. So it can be hard to reach out. All right, warning signs of an abuser: extreme jealousy, an attempt to control, tendency to blame others, so particularly that person, and is often seen as a nice person to others. So it's like having two different people. So somebody that can be super nice and be highly functional, and then all of a sudden behind closed doors, they're not that.
That's split.
Yeah, total split. All right, then there's a cycle. So you guys, I know you already know a lot about this, but the cycle, it just keeps going in a circle. So the person is abused. After the abused leaves, the abuser is remorseful for it. The abused returns to the situation, and the cycle continues. So it's not a cycle that's easily broken. The abuser might even feel strongly remorseful and really want to change, but there is, a severe character flaw, sin in their lives that creates this cycle of going back and forth. Now you guys are going to have to do ministry for people that are abused, just about every one of you. Like family, friends, people in your church. I mean, this is something that's going to touch everybody's life. So knowing how to deal with it is complicated. It's really complicated because there's frequently two sides of the story too, that you might only hear one side and not hear the other side. Or maybe you have a situation where it's in the church and you have two people saying their side, and they want you to take one side, and truth can be hard to know at times. So it can be a really difficult thing to navigate through. All right, child abuse. So, I wanted to go more into before we go into the child abuse thing. We're going to read through this. All right. This is a letter from a battered woman who attended a presentation on battering. Anyway, just if anybody has any thoughts on any of these things, we can stop. So let me know. All right, you will never be able to realize how it felt to sit there looking like a well-dressed middle-class woman, knowing that you were talking about me. It was the first time I had ever heard anyone say I wasn't wrong for being beaten. I will give you my own firsthand experiences and hope that it will be useful to you. I'm presently married to a man who beats me, so I will have to remain unidentified. I'm in my 30s, and so is my husband. I have a high school education and presently attending a local college, trying to find an education I need to support myself. My husband is a college graduate and a professional in his field. So here there's already fear of, if I leave, what's going to happen to me financially? How am I going to survive? All right, so that is a concern. Like, how am I going to make it? And if there's children involved, how am I going to do this? How am I going to leave? Who's going to believe me? We're both attractive people, and for most part, respected and well-liked. All right, so people are going to be surprised by this. We have 3 children, live in a middle-class home with all the comforts one would possibly want. I have everything except life without fear. For most of my married life, I've been periodically beaten by my husband. What do I mean by beaten? I mean those times when parts of my body have been hit violently and repeatedly, causing painful bruises, swellings, bleeding wounds, unconsciousness, or a combination of those things. I've had glasses thrown at me. I've been kicked in the abdomen when I was visibly pregnant. I've been kicked off the bed hit while lying on the floor while I was pregnant. I've been whipped, kicked and thrown, picked up and thrown down. I've been punched and kicked in the head, chest, face, abdomen on numerous occasions. I've been slapped for saying things about politics, having different views about a religion, for swearing, for crying, for wanting to have intercourse. I have been threatened when I wouldn't do something I was told to. I've been threatened when I stated bitterly that I didn't like what he was doing with another woman. Each time my husband has left the house and remained gone for days. Few people have ever seen my black and blue face or swollen lips because I've always stayed indoors feeling ashamed. My husband on a few occasions did call a day or so later to provide me with an excuse that I could use for returning for work, the grocery store, the dentist appointment, and so on. I used the excuses: a car accident, oral surgery, things like that. Why didn't you seek help, you might ask? I did. I went early in our marriage to a clergyman who, after a few visits, told me that my husband meant no real harm, that he was just confused and felt insecure. All right, so be careful for what you say when somebody comes and tells you these things. All right, it could be accurate, it could be not accurate too. People do make wild stories. Always realize that you have to be really investigative before you give advice. You know, trying to get the whole story on both sides. But always err on the side of protecting the person who is saying that they are abused. Somehow finding a way to protect them. More important, I was to forgive him for the beatings, just as Christ has forgiven me from the cross, so I did. This person sounds crazy. So things continued the same. I turned next time to a doctor. I was given pills to relax me and told to take things a little easier. I was just too nervous. I mean, sometimes people really aren't believed. I turned to a friend, and when her husband found out, he accused me of either making things up or exaggerating the situation. She was told to stay away from me. She didn't, but she could no longer help. I turned to a professional family guidance agency. There I was told my husband needed help and I should find a way to control the incidents. But I couldn't control the beating. That was his decision. I called the police one time. All right, so this person has tried. They not only didn't respond to the call, but they called several hours later to ask if things had settled down. I could have been dead by then. I've nowhere to go if it happens again. No one wants a woman with 3 children. Even, I mean, seriously, it is a lot. That's a heavy burden. Even if someone is kind enough, they wouldn't want to become involved in what is commonly referred to as a domestic situation. Everyone I I've gone to for help somehow wanted to blame me and to vindicate my husband. No one has to provoke a wife beater. He'll hit when he's ready and for whatever reason he wishes. I know that I do not want to be hit. I know too that I will be beaten again unless I find a way out for myself and for my children. I'm terrified for them also. As a married woman, I have no recourse but to remain in the situation, which is causing me to be painfully abused. I've suffered physical and emotional battering and spiritual rape, all because of the social structure of my world, and I cannot do anything about a man who wants to beat me. Society says I must be committed to a man without an opportunity for an education and earning capacity. It says that my children must be subjected to the emotional battering caused when they see their mother's face beaten and hear my screams in the middle of the night. I would like to write more, but that would take a book, and there's no market because there are no ears. Thank you, Jane Doe. All right, so what do you think of that?
Very sad.
It is sad. One thing to know as a minister is that you should have all sorts of resources available for knowing how to deal with situations like this and other problems. There's going to be a list of things that you're going to have to deal with. So you should know resources for people going through domestic violence. And domestic violence isn't always just women. There are plenty of men who the women beat on the men and it's seen as okay. All right, they might, be even more ashamed or have tolerated it for longer, but it still makes it wrong. All right, so you have to find resources for people in all sorts of problems. So remember that this is an area, and if you don't know what sort of advice to say, don't give it. All right, and always err on protecting the person who might be abused and finding out the situation until you can get clarification. Particularly if you have both of those people in your church. And it's tricky.
Like, for me, like, when I hear of domestic situations like that, my first initiative is always to tell whoever's being abused to leave, but it's not always easy for them to do.
Right.
And I like what you said when you implemented the church into it and our call to ministry.
Yeah.
It allowed me to forward think that into the future. So like, in the future, if I'm set up in an atmosphere where I have a voice and I can get a facility for domesticated people to go, and maybe even get the law to get a restraining order so we can be separated, I think that would be a healthy and realistic outreach for domesticated people.
So you might need to have phone numbers for lawyers.
Yeah. Yeah, Paige.
Hi, I've been in an abusive relationship before for like 5 years, so I understand what you're saying about how and I understand what she's saying, like you go to help, and I've had different people come to me and be like, oh, well, what did you do to provoke him? Like, nothing. I literally did nothing. But like, it's not easy to leave. It really isn't. So I understand your point of view, just like, oh, just leave. It's not that easy just to leave. And it's not like I had like this Stockholm syndrome either. And if we're being honest, like, I just needed, and in my case, like I was very, very young when that happened. I was 14 and I stayed with him until about like last year, like at the beginning of the year. And I know Marlissa knows this about me because I've explained the situation to her. I think the worst thing to say to somebody as people that are going to minister to like people that are going to come to you that are going to be broken is well, one, like don't just be like, oh, forgive him because Christ forgave you. No, that's like, yes, forgiveness is very hard, and forgiveness we should give it without thinking. But those are circumstances where you shouldn't forgive somebody because you should know. And this is also something that I've gotten told multiple times, like you should know your worth. And like that takes a really long time to know your worth after somebody you love has treated you worse than like anybody else has treated you in your entire life. So I feel like there's certain things to tell people that are in those circumstances, like not just to leave because it's not that easy because you don't know what they're going through, and like there's just certain things to avoid when you say stuff like that. Like I understand where you're coming from, like you want them to leave, and I love that you said that you want to help them as much as possible, but sometimes the only thing that can help is just providing them a safe space. And there's like phone numbers out there that you can call and they'll like actually help you get out of that situation.
So, I've heard many people your age actually say this. There's lots of people. It seems as though it's a problem for people in young, that younger people in relationships. Could you tell us why you think that there is a desire to stay in the first place?
I can. So, you guys might not even like me after I say
You
this.
might not
but
like me.
I don't even care, to be honest. But just to be honest, completely honest, when I was about like 19 to like 20, I became an abusive relationship, and I became very abusive towards my girlfriend that I had. And that was probably like the only relationship, I told you about this, it was the only relationship that I was in my life that was serious. And I became, like I was using drugs, I was drinking, and that's not to justify my actions, because I own my actions and what I did. But in that toxic environment, it seemed like I had lost a sense of myself. And the only reason why we stayed in that relationship was because I was using, and it forced her to use, and when she started using, she started acting outside of herself. So when she had cheated, it like drove a wedge between us, and like I wanted to leave, but she didn't want to leave, so like we stayed in that, and it created toxic. And we identified our values through sex, and through that exchange, and that was like our only base that we had. So we never had time to talk or anything like that because of how rampant the toxicity was. So I think the only reason why that relationship stayed as long as it did was because of that. And you talk about that in class, like when sex is your bottom line and you have a toxic relationship.
Okay.
So you asked the question of like, why did you stay as long as you
Yeah.
did? And like simply it was, I was young, like this is my first real relationship. And he was like, if we're gonna be 100% honest, like I don't really care if any of you judge me because it's my life. But like my first relationship, I was 14 years old. I had like just turned 14 years old. I had known him like almost my whole entire life. And he was amazing. Like the first full year we were together, he was like the perfect boyfriend on paper. And I genuinely was like, okay, I want to stay with him for a while. And like obviously when you're 14, you're kind of like this little hopeless romantic, and that's not bad. But I fell in love with him, and then like kind of when he realized that I wasn't ever going to leave because he had already gotten me, then he started treating me really horribly. And then I fell in love with his family. I mean, like they watched me grow up. Like they still talk to me to this day. Like his mom still tells me she loves me and stuff. So that's also what made it extremely hard. And like he knows me like the back of his hand. Like I wish he didn't anymore because of the person he turned out to be. But it was both of our first real relationship, and
Yeah.
I've forgiven him. It's hard because I truly believe that he like completely broke me into like little tiny pieces. And I'm not saying that I was like this giant victim. Like I said stuff to him that I probably shouldn't have, and I'm not a perfect person. But I stayed because I truly thought I was in love with him, and I loved his family, and his mom and his dad became like a second safe space for me. So when he started acting up, I felt like I couldn't go talk to other people, and like when I did, I just felt like I was painting him in such a bad light. And then the question of like, why don't you just leave? Like, what's wrong with you? Like, and then people would look at me and say, oh, well, I would never let a guy do that to me. I'm like, oh, actually you would, because if you love them enough, you get
Yeah,
kind of like
I guess
this
it's that
trick.
love
So,
concept makes
yeah.
you do things that you.
It's
Yeah.
it's powerful, and it feels very manipulative. And
Right.
don't get me wrong, like I am thankful to God, and I feel like how I did get out of that situation. Like, I had broken up with him because he was cheating on me, and I was like, you know what, I deserve a whole lot more than you. And so I broke up with him, and then about 4 months later I got back together with him.
That's the
And
challenge.
it was horrible, because like, I knew, I really hoped that he had changed, and like you said, that cycle starts over again.
Yeah.
And it just got at least 10 times worse. Like, he started physically abusing me even more, and like, there was mental abuse, like there was abuse on a whole other level. And it was to the point where like his mom saw it, and we were both in high school,
Yeah.
and his mom saw it, and she didn't do anything about it. And then I would talk to other people that I had trusted, like actual adults,
Right.
and I felt like I couldn't really talk to my family because, I mean, they wouldn't let me see him, you know, after I told them what had happened, and I loved him at the time. So it's hard when you think you love somebody, and I truly do feel like I did love him, because like those feelings don't just go away. Like, I was in love with him for 5 years. So it's really hard, but the way I got out of it was I was actually in a Trinity dorm room, and I asked, like, if you don't know who Jocelyn Stephenson is, she's amazing, and she really helped me with this. I asked her how she got out of like sort of like a mental abusive relationship, and she said she just gave up, like she gave it to God. And I was sitting in my dorm room, and I was sobbing and crying, and it was like 2 a.m. and I just looked like up at the ceiling, and I was all like, God, I'm done. Like, I truly am just done. Like, please just save me from this, because I can't do it any longer. And then 2 days later, we broke up, and I've never heard from him since. And I'm thankful, because now I'm engaged to somebody who's not
All right, thanks for sharing that. Before we, okay, what did you want to say?
I just wanted to say that, love I think it depends also on the person too. 'Cause can be different aspects of how a person's manipulated as well. Like, love, I think, is a really big one. And being, like, thinking that they've changed, but then it just doesn't happen, it causes a cycle. But also, like, finances, and then, like, how that,
Yeah, that's a
one lady
real
was saying
issue.
that the kids,
Yeah,
what you're gonna do with the kids, and you don't want them to be taken away and for the
like to
user
be,
have
yeah, well, my
custody.
kid's be in a worse situation,
Mhm.
right,
Yeah,
it comes up, yeah.
I think a good thing to do instead of like just saying to like leave or something is, like, I know there's these places because my mom worked at one point, which is kind of ironic. But anyways, there's places where these women can go. That's a safe place where the husband or boyfriend or whatever won't know
Right,
where they're at all.
yeah,
And they won't let them in at all. The only problem is that if they do end up contacting them where they feel bad about leaving,
yeah.
sometimes they do go back,
Mhm.
and it still continues that cycle. But I think it'd be good to like ensure something like that, to like give them a place that they can go where they know
Right.
they will be safe.
Yeah,
And-
Ellendale has the Kaddish house just over by, across from the Nazarene church area is over there. There's one in town. All right, we have 2 presentations, so we gotta get through those. You wanna go first? Yeah. All right.
Okay, so I wrote a research paper on the negative effects of hormonal birth control on women. And so I just went through 3 different points. The first one was how hormones are a major factor when it comes to like sexual desire. And so a lot of women are taking hormonal birth control so that they don't get pregnant.
This is the stuff that nobody tells you guys.
So they're trying not to get pregnant, and they can have as much sex as they want with whoever they want. But in reality, the hormonal birth control changes your hormones and makes you have like a lower sex drive and lower like sexual function. And so that's just like one of the first like negatives. And then the second one is with mood changes and mental health. So there's been lots of studies done on it, and like IUDs can cause depression, anxiety, sleep problems, and then there's other things such as like obesity and stuff that can all tie into mental health disorders and mood changes. It changes with like estrogen and progesterone and the brain function, and so it's like literally changing like your brain chemistry and then like how you respond to all of that. And then the third one is your stress response system. So the hormones in birth control, in different ones, can change your stress response. And one of the quotes I found, it talks about how women and men have different stress response, and when you're taking a hormonal birth control, one of the chemicals in it changes your stress response to act more like a man's stress response, which is
Weird.
not great for a woman to have, because women should be responding differently, men should be responding differently. And then it also like goes with chronic stress. So chronic stress has a lot of different negatives that can cause like anxiety, depression, obesity, all kinds of different things, and like clogged arteries, high blood pressure. And so women who take hormonal birth control have similar levels in their brain to people who experience chronic stress as a child. And so those are just like the 3 different things I looked at, but there's like tons more. And like so many people just go on hormonal birth control because they want to like solve like, oh, like I have acne as a teenager, like that's what birth control can fix. But then they're like getting all of these other negative health effects that they don't know about because doctors don't say anything about it. So that's what I did.
All right, Dylan, what do you got?
D-Dog.
I went ahead and just wrote a poem, because I thought it would be easy, and it ended up being a little more difficult than I thought, but I had fun with it nonetheless. So, it's called "Every City Has a Graveyard." Oh, and then it switched notes on me. Hold on one second. Where'd it go? Oh, it just disappeared. There it is. Okay. Every city has a graveyard. There was a city made with love and affection, attention to every detail, flaw, and correction. With a view so beautiful, architecture so sublime, a sunset undefeatable, and a sunrise that exposed the skyline. But every city has a graveyard, where joy became gloom, where hope became doom, and dreams never seemed so far. When care became despair, where law became flaw, where every dream seemed so far, because every city has a graveyard. But it would be so easy to look past as you ride the subway, while you watch the Broadway and enjoy the cars that drive fast. But what is buried is the reason for what is built. You wouldn't have the building so high if not for what is 6 feet below. Every city has a graveyard, where joy comes from gloom, where hope comes from doom, and where dreams can be seen from afar. Were it not for despair, we would care. If it weren't for the flaw, then we would have no law. Every city has a graveyard where the past lays to rest, so the city can be its very best. So obviously, I'm not literally talking about a city and its graveyard, but in terms of like what we've been doing throughout this class, and even just kind of applying to Trinity culture, everyone's always looking for the perfect partner. And for me, that's the biggest pet peeve. Anyone who looks at me is like, Dylan, you're going to find the perfect partner. I'm like, shut up, no I'm not. Because there is no such thing as the perfect partner. Because no one's perfect. And so, a lot of times, basically, the city itself is kind of represents, well, for me, like another lady, hopefully, that I can turn into my wife, or just for the general public, someone who you're going to spend the rest of your life with. And every person in this room has their flaws and their mistakes and their rough past. But you can either look at it as like this ugly, depressing, aspect of that person, or you can look at it as they have these things of their past that has led them to be the most amazing person that they are in their present. And then continuing to work from there and to grow and to become even more beautiful, not just physically, obviously, but in personality and your relationship with the Lord and that kind of deal. So that's what I think.
All right.
Please stop that.
All right, now we're looking at abuse of children.
Use 2 children?
Abuse, child abuse.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
You said,
What did I say?
You said abusive children.
Abusive children.
So the child abuses.
the child would be
Abuse
abused.
of-
Yeah, that's what I thought we were
I
doing.
got
Abuse of children.
She said abuse of children.
That makes more sense.
Yeah, I think
I
that's.
imagine a kid like spanking the parent.
Yeah.
I guess not abuse of children too. That's what it feels like to be a substitute teacher, actually.
You watched that one?
All right, most often at the hands of parents. So children are more frequently abused by their own parents than other people. Or even, it could be relatives too, but most often at the hand of parents. Children under 3 are at the highest risk. Why would that be?
They get annoying.
Behavior.
Okay, they got a lot of behavior problems. They need a lot of correction. They're also, small. All right, so doing something to them is, it can be highly damaging. It can be caused by multiple factors. So situational. So marriage problems, bringing out stress in the marriage, taking it out on the child. Money trouble. A child that has special needs in the first place is more likely to be abused. Psychological abusers can have poor control, exhibit certain personality traits. What sort of personality traits do you think would be a sign of an abusive sort of parent? What do you
Random
think?
acts of acting out.
Okay, acting out,
Bullying. They
bullying.
become the bullier.
All right, act bullying.
Not like showing like external signs, but being very controlling.
Okay, controlling. Maybe withholding affection. Could be. Sometimes it's not obvious. Outbursts of anger. Socially, another factor that could be part of it is having a violent role model. So we talked about sometimes abused children or can become abusive people, that they can abuse their partners and their own children. They might not. All right, and then just seeing violence overall in culture. Abuse can start out as benign. All right, so we talked a lot when we talked through the spanking issue. All right, so it can start out as something simple like that, and then escalate to something bigger in the wrong circumstances. All right, such as cases of children being spanked for continual wrong behavior. Anybody want to say anything about this particular issue? Okay. All right, strategies for victims of domestic violence. All right. Victims often are isolated, so that's an issue. 4 psychological stages of battered people. First thing, denial. All right, there's first a refusal to believe that there's a problem, like trying to decide, is there actually something there, and not really believing it. Guilt, the victim feels like it's their fault. They might have negative things that they've done in the relationship, yet acknowledges the problem, so that's making a step forward. Enlightenment, the victim recognizes abuse is wrong, but stays in the relationship to work it out. And then 4, responsibility. So making a decision to leave, important. This is when you need support during this time. All right, so when you're dealing with people who are going through this, realize that there are these stages. And that frequently one goes from one to the next before they actually do decide to leave. So just be aware that they have different stages in trying to really process and figure it out in the first place. All right, Christian response to spousal abuse. All right, so we talked about how marriage is a covenant, how it's meant to be permanent, how God's involved in it, and it's supposed to be a great thing. But due to sin, things sometimes go wrong. All right, so as Christians, we should stand up against abuse, and in the cases where there is abuse, we would consider this a rightful reason for divorce. All right, because it's a breaking of that covenant relationship. God wants to deliver abusers too. So always remember that side, that we're not only looking towards ministering towards the abused, but also towards the abuser, and that God can bring about redemption through their lives. All right, separation of abusers from the victims is an important first step. And if possible, with repentance and a lot of work, the goal could be to have the family reunited. All right, but that is a step I think that you don't push in the initial stages. All right, you're not really pushing people to work through it that quickly. But over time, if that could happen, that would be great. But most of the time it doesn't. All right, but it would be great. All right, let's stop there today.
Just one more shot. Ladies first.
Yeah, Kayla's here.
Ah.
No, she's, I don't know.
Yeah, right.
I don't know.
That would be so dumb if Michaela could come.
If she is, I can send her to hang out.
Time for statistics.
Hopefully with that, I wanna turn into Samson when I hear about.
Never mind
She giving you guys the keys?
She's out there somewhere. Yeah.
You're gonna forget your cup. Mike,
Oh, thank you.
be responsible.
that.
You're tired, you just drank coffee.
That was an hour ago.
I like your sweater a lot.
Thanks, man.
Thanks,